Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. Thanks to Capital One, our sponsor here at South by Southwest, where we're doing podcasts live from the Capital One house at Antone's. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here at Capital One House, South by Southwest, the famous Antone's, and I'm here with the famous Amy Heidersbach. How are you?
I'm great, Alex. How are you doing today?
Good. And we met last year at this event, and I wanted to talk with you what really has happened between last year and now in Capital One's journey, on its, really I think of it as like its mission really to work with developers, to find ways to connect with developers, how to solve the problems of developers that developers have. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about where we were last year and how it compares now, then perhaps then we can talk through the year.
Absolutely. So this time last year, we launched Capital One Dev Exchange. So we're celebrating our first anniversary here at Antone's.
And what is that exactly?
Capital One Dev Exchange is our external API platform, which now also is the way to find out about our open source projects. So that's been one of the developments since we launched last year. Last year, we launched in beta. With 3 public APIs, and I think a recognition that rather than go out with what other companies have launched as a big splash API platform where they kind of know the answers, we took a very different approach and said, you know what, we want to launch in beta. We want to have the external community engage with us and help us get it right for them.
That's important.
I think that's really important when you're working with developers and partners, and it definitely gives you a sense of the humility and approach we've taken to go to market with Dev Exchange in general.
It's such a critical lesson, and I attended the Linux Foundation's Open Source Leadership Conference a few weeks ago, and there was a conversation I was having with some technologists about a really large open source project that had been going on for several years, and they talked about how it just started off too big, and they were expected to do everything at scale immediately, right? And that led to real problems because they couldn't actually do those big things because they had to start very, very small.
Right. I think one of the things that I've learned working with developers in the developer community now for 8+ years is, it's hard to get a second chance. So out of respect and out of this notion that we're co-creating the future together, which is a big part of why we chose Dev Exchange as our name. We do see it as very much a give and take, and so that really informed our thinking about how we wanted to show up last year when we launched, and now that we're in GA and have released some new features of our APIs, have introduced new APIs, have started really engaging the community with hackathons and co-created playlists on Spotify and just a lot of fun but also valuable things for the dev community. We are very comfortable with going slow to help developers succeed and go fast into the future, to get the products right, to get the documentation, the support model right, and to be able not only to scale ourselves, but to help them scale, because that's what they're really looking for.
That is what they're looking for. And so tell me about what you've done in the past year, to improve upon what Dev Exchange does by focusing on keeping it small and iterative and that feedback loop continuing to like help you, get to the next place?
Right. So out of the gate, when we launched Dev Exchange, we were less interested in a big, marketing campaign, and really more interested in things like the sandbox experience, the API documentation, reference apps, the support systems that we had in place, and getting feedback on what was working and what wasn't. So we spent a lot of time in conversations, going through feedback, getting into our documentation, building better reference apps, making sure that that was really right, and working in a high-touch way with our first set of integration partners to learn as they go through the process what we could improve. So, when you really pay attention to that, and we're not a huge team, it takes several months to go through beta and feel like you can move into general availability from a platform perspective.
So how do you then measure validation?
Validation.
With the community.
How do we measure it?
Yeah, how do you think about, how do you know you're getting the feedback, and how do you know what to improve upon? So when you're like going to those external developers and like getting their, so like it's all a cycle,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, every single piece of feedback was actioned.
Okay.
And we had service level agreements of how quickly we'd get back to the community, where it was on our roadmap. So we tracked all of that.
Interesting.
So, nothing was so small or too unimportant to us. Everything was looked at, was actioned, was addressed, even if it was not put in a high priority. Maybe we deprioritized it, but we knew where it was on the product roadmap, and we addressed every single bit of feedback.
That requires a lot of discipline.
It does. And again, it's easy to underestimate the value of that.
Yeah.
I think that, again, it's easy to launch APIs and put them on a website and say we have them, and miss the important things about documentation, support, feedback to the community when they're giving you their important time and energy to give you that feedback in the first place.
Yeah.
And so again, Capital One Dev Exchange came out of the gate thinking high touch, thinking respect and co-creation with our community, and I think that's really served us well. We aren't scaling as fast as, other API platforms that I've worked on or that you see in the marketplace has scaled, but the feedback and the quality of our integrations and the feedback from our developer community has been really positive. So we feel like we're on the right track with the intention to push out more awesome APIs on our roadmap and grow and grow and grow.
This is also about understanding the nuances, the strengths, the weaknesses of your own teams, right?
That's true.
Because these teams, as I understand, are very cross-functional.
Absolutely a big part of the way that we work at Capital One, right?
Yeah.
So we really believe in the power of product, tech, and design.
Right.
We are ourselves very cross-functionally organized.
Right.
So you can imagine, we have hundreds, thousands of APIs that we work with internally.
Right.
Across a company of 50,000 employees.
Right.
So when you go out back into those businesses to look to which APIs we want to externalize,
right,
that's not a quick or easy conversation. It's not just one person who's making that decision. You have to really work across the organization in a collaborative way. And sometimes, depending upon whether or not they innately understand the value of externalizing an API, you might have to bring them along on the journey. I think a lot of companies who maybe didn't start digitally or start as a platform business have to go through that change. Like, what is the value of externalizing APIs? What are the risks? What are all of the considerations? So a lot of our team's job is bringing those internal partners along and really helping them understand the value of spending their time externalizing an API versus doing something else that's on their roadmap.
Yeah, interesting process that must be when you're considering just in that internal API infrastructure that I know Capital One has developed
Right.
and built according to an API lifecycle management process.
True.
That you then have to consider across lots of different groups inside the organization. I think of in terms of a company like Capital One and how regulated it is, just the attorneys who really need to be comfortable with what you're doing as well.
Absolutely. At the same time that we value what developers are trying to do, and we want to help them solve problems and reach goals that they've identified, whether it's learning or building a new product or starting a new business.
Yeah.
We have to protect our end customers,
right.
And we have our risk partners, our legal partners,
right.
our finance partners, our business partners
right.
to all help us with that.
Right.
It is a complicated, much more complicated than other businesses that I've worked in, because this is my first bank job.
Right.
And it's complicated, but I'm at Capital One because they are absolutely committed to it. We were the first bank to do this in the
right.
U.S., and we're not stopping, that's for sure.
That's cool. It also reminds me of a conversation I had last night with one of your engineers, and we were talking about the challenges that you have when you're developing those APIs and thinking about how they're going to be used, and such issues come into play, such as, we need to think about how we present that in a manner that actually keeps us in compliance with the law, right? So that forms a lot of interesting challenges, for instance, for the UI designers and the UX designers,
right.
and then the application developers. So it has this cascading effect, and that has to become part of that loop, doesn't it? Then, because then you got to be able to then present it to the developers and say, hey, does this solve your problems?
Does this solve your problems, and are you then able to help us validate that what we hold true for our end customers that now we're sharing with those developers is something that they can, that's risk that they can assume
right.
and report back to us and
right.
validate as well.
Right.
So yeah, it's that loop is was hard enough to figure out internally 3.5 years ago when we started on this journey.
Right.
But now that we're working with the external development community to both deliver value, but also make sure that those requirements and, trust, security standards are met in another experience that we're not delivering in our own four walls, that's a whole new
right.
What are they? A whole new ball of wax.
Right. And I think about the APIs in platforms that you really worked on this year. You guys did you made a lot of announcements around, well, not a lot, but you actually you really invested in Alexa, right? And
right, conversational interfaces, voice activation.
Right. You had your rewards API, right?
Right.
You also had your bank account starter API.
We introduced that in November, right? And within 24 hours, we had a production access request from a partner of ours in DC. So we were surprised at how valuable
wow.
that was right out of the gate. But we have really started with things that Capital One does well, innately in our business. Really making the process of discovering the right credit offers for you, which
right.
is our credit offers API.
Right.
And working with our existing affiliate businesses like Credit Sesame, who was here with us at South by
right.
this year, and creditcards.com, who launched
right.
with us last
right.
year, making sure it works for them. Let's learn with them.
Right.
And the metrics are great. Early on, creating more acquisition for them, more card holders for us.
Right.
It's a great channel as
right.
people learn in a safe environment about multiple products, not just Venture or Quicksilver or another. So it's a great experience going through affiliates, and we're hoping to build that program as our current affiliates integrate our API and deliver a better experience for their customers.
So looking at the year ahead, I guess the plan is just to continue offering open APIs? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think we see fully open, we see kind of partner only,
yeah.
we see various levels of
so it's really becoming a
openness.
business.
But,
yeah.
I think we aspire to be open and public with as many APIs as we can. You see with the Netflix example that we're starting sometimes with a point-to-point integration with a large partner to learn. But more APIs around bank capabilities, card offering capabilities, identity and security, the things that we already do well at
Right.
Capital One. I think that's what you can expect.
Well, Amy, thank you very much for taking some time to talk here at
Pleasure.
the Capital One House at South by Southwest. It's so much fun to be here again, and the progress you guys have been made in a year is commendable, and look forward to keeping in touch and following your continued efforts in this in leadership.
It's great to have you here, Alex. Thank you for being a fan and just asking tough questions.
Yeah.
But also helping to get the word out about Capital One Dev Exchange.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks to Capital One, our sponsor for our podcast from South by Southwest at the Capital One House. Thanks for joining us.